welcome everybody today to our introduction to the GC Index virtual boardroom that is being facilitated by Siobhan Godden from Equality Consulting and Coaching. My name's Jo Thompson and I'm a consultant for HR Recruit. I'm joined today by Siobhan, who will introduce herself shortly. Siobhan is going to explain to you about the GC Index and describe how it connects people and business with data that organisations has not had before. If you've got any questions during the session, then please put them into the chat box facility and we will answer them as we go along. I'm now going to hand over to Siobhan, who will introduce herself and start the session. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Jo, and hi everybody. Thanks for joining. So yes, I'm Siobhan. I am a HR consultant and coach. And the things I enjoy the most are things around development opportunities, those coaching conversations and supporting leaders. And that led me to discovering the GC Index. And I don't know if anyone's heard about them before, because I certainly hadn't until very recently. Very recently, the last 12 months. So it's one of those things I want to shout about, really, because I'm a bit of a sucker for a tool and a bit of a sucker for anything to do with how we can help bridge the conversation with managers and organisations around the people piece. I'm assuming most people on the call are in a HR role in some capacity. So we've all probably felt the pain of trying to kind of get that buy-in and try and get leaders and managers who perhaps aren't from this background. I've predominantly worked in engineering environments, so looking at data and facts and things like that really resonates with them, and it helps you have that conversation around soft skills that aren't actually that soft, they're actually pretty hard, and how we can develop them. So as Jo said, shout out any questions if you want, put it in the chat, but also I'm happy for you to take yourselves off mute as well. Hopefully most of you have had the opportunity to complete a profile yourselves. I've had a few more coming in this morning, actually, so there might be some people on the call that maybe haven't had the data in time for this session, but there is an offer that I will share your profiles with you. And we're even happy to have a 30-minute conversation just to give you a bit of context around your own personal profiles. But what's great about this is because I've had some data already, I've used that data to inform some of this webinar to kind of bring it a bit alive a little bit. It's all anonymized, so it's not like I've got people's names and say this is what you look like, because it's all, I don't even have the data myself. I have it all very anonymized at this moment. So it's all GDPR compliant and things, but you might be intrigued to look at it and think, oh, I wonder if that's me, and all that kind of stuff. So hopefully it brings it to life a little bit. So an introduction to what the GC Index is. Why is my slides not moving? Hold on a second. Oh, there we go. I'm probably going to jump a load of slides now. So the way I'm focusing this session on is looking at the team snapshot report, because I'm essentially pretending that you guys that have created your profiles are a team. But there are a number of different ways you can use it. And the purpose of it is it provides a snapshot or an overview when we're looking at the team in how both a team and individuals, how they collectively influence a team and what impact they're having. So what the GC Index does is it looks at how individuals and teams can impact in the roles that they're doing. And what they do is they put people into certain unique combinations, and what they call is proclivities. So it's around where people have a natural kind of energy towards something. And I'll go into this in a bit more detail, but we're not looking at personality. And this is why it's a bit different from what we've seen before. I love a personality profile. And actually you could use this in connection with a personality profile as well, actually. That can be really powerful too. But it is slightly different. It's looking at where people have their energy, and it's very hidden. It's kind of the bit we don't see. And actually, if I was to do this in a one-to-one conversation, as a coaching conversation, it's quite honestly sometimes things that we don't know in ourselves, or we don't consciously think about ourselves. And when I try to explain how I believe proclivities to be is, if you're doing a role or a job or an activity and you're in your flow and you've lost track of time and you're on it and you're being really productive, you have a strong proclivity in that type of work. If it's something you might actively avoid, or you think, actually, this is going to take a bit of energy from me, I need to really focus, I'm going to work from home that day and lock myself in a room, then you have a less proclivity to do it. And why I find it quite interesting is because, as an example, I had a one-to-one coaching conversation with somebody who just this week who had completed the GC index, and they'd moved into a new role. They moved into that role. It was actually a sideways move because they were really, really interested in the subject matter. It was actually a hobby. So his philosophy was, like, oh, if I can have a job that's also a hobby, this will be fantastic. He's ticked all the boxes. The actual content of the work he's doing, he's really, really loving, but there was something amiss. There was a disconnect, and he wasn't as engaged as he felt he should have been. And going to his profile, what actually came out was he hasn't had the opportunity to really utilize one of his really, really strong proclivities. So he was a polisher, and I'll explain what that means. He had a very strong proclivity to be a polisher, and in his new role he didn't have that opportunity to bring that forward. So his action afterwards was to actually, I'm going to have a chat with my boss about this and see, well, where can I bring in some of these elements? Where can I start using that energy that I love in my role? So it's not about changing roles, it's not about anything as dramatic as that. It's more about, well, how can I incorporate that a little bit more? And I'm going to have a discussion with my manager about that. So it's really, really, it can be really powerful in how it can be used. So the GC index has 5 what they call proclivities: the game changer, the strategist, the playmaker, the implementer, and the polisher. Now, some of you, if you're from a HR background, you might be very familiar with things like Belbin. That's the closest I've found, because it's looking at like kind of team roles. It is still slightly different though, because it's not looking at personality, which Belbin looks at, and the language is very different. But that's probably the most similar I've found. But it's quite easy to fall into a trap of, oh, if I'm a polisher, I'm a complete finisher. No, they're completely different things. But I'll touch on that a little bit later. And then, as I said, we're going to go through what a team snapshot might look like in terms of if we're doing this as a team kind of coaching facilitation session, and questions you might want to ask them. So, positioning the GC index, what is it for? So essentially, if we simplify things, an organization is just a group of people making decisions. True. Doesn't matter what you're making, what you're doing, it is just a group of people making decisions. And they're making decisions about 2 things: the business as usual processes, what's happening every day, and then projects for change, what's coming up, what we're going to need to do. And to be successful, the organizations need to make the best decisions. So to make the best decisions, we need the best data. And this is where it really resonates with organizations. And I use this either in-house, because I also have an in-house role as well, but also as an external consultant, because it's using business language. It's using things that actually, we're not talking about HR acronyms and things like that. We're actually talking business language here, which is why it really resonates. These are all the different areas where the GC index can help make decisions. So when we're looking at any kind of decisions or activities that organizations are doing, and again, it's another reason why I love it, because look at all of those lists that it can be included. Now, for me, myself, I focus on mergers and acquisitions, because I work in large companies where they're acquiring other businesses. And wouldn't it be great? And when I discovered this, I needed this 2 years ago. We acquired a business. We basically ended up with 200 employees coming into the business, and we were told by the company that was selling them, this is what you've got. And of course, what you realize is 6 months in, the reality is actually very different from what they've sold you. Now, if we had something like this, I would have got a bit of a head start. I would have actually had a better idea of actually, what have I bought here, without having to take that time to kind of figure it out for yourself. So that's a big one for me. But leadership, coaching and development is an obvious one. Everything in the HR space. Recruitment is fantastic, because you can look at it in terms of, well, is this person going to have the right energy for this role that we're looking for? There's also a really cool tool that I'll talk about at the end called the GC Translate, which is really, really handy for recruitment. There's talent development, so having those career conversations like my client I mentioned earlier, team coaching development, which is what I'm going to focus a bit more on today. There's also the young people development. So there's actually a bespoke one for ages 13 to 18. So anyone that might work in education, or anyone that has apprenticeships or engaging with schools and colleges around, that kind of future skills, that could be really, really, really useful for that as well. Culture transformation, ED&I, well-being, organisation design and development. You can be able to see, once I go into the tool a little bit more, just how easy it is to apply to all of these different things. So things that we measure already. I need to move your pictures a little bit because I can't see my screen now. There we go. So what we already measure, we measure expertise. We can see what skills people have. We can see what qualifications they've got, what certifications they've got. We measure that. We measure experience. We can see on somebody's CV how many years they've done in a certain industry, in a certain job role. And we also measure personality. Probably some organizations more than others, but we look at insights and 360 reviews and all sorts of different personality profiles. As I said, still love them. Not saying stop doing them. I'm saying actually, if you use it as well, even better. But what we don't really measure, because how do you measure it, is impact, and how your employees are actually making an impact into the organization. And just a little bit of a backstory, actually. How the GC Index was born was they were asked, a very small consultancy at the time, they were asked to do a development program in an organization and identify the game changers. So that's where the GC comes from. It stands for game changers. So they were told to identify game changers, and they did the classic thing, which was, well, we look at our top talent, and we look at our appraisal systems, and we look at the high potentials. And like, but hold on a minute, there's some people that aren't necessarily high potentials who could have a huge impact on your organization, and we're not picking them up. How do we find those people? It's actually, you're only looking at one element. Actually, how do we find where these other game changers are in the organization that might not be a high potential? It could be that they're doing amazingly innovative things in the role that they're doing. So that's how they started on this journey, and how the GC Index was born, because it's around, actually, let's think a little bit differently about what potential is. It's not necessarily about potential, it's about impact. How can you make the most impact? So, and we can use it to measure impact, and then think about, well, how can this person drive change? So when you're thinking about the role you might be recruiting for, or you're going through a transformation, you might be starting to ask these questions as a business. How can this person drive change? Can this person deliver in what I'm asking them to do? Can this person bring the team together? Maybe it's a leadership management role. Can they bring the team together? Can this person plan for success? So are they quite strategic thinking? Is this person innovative? Can they come up with new ideas? Or can this person drive improvement? And it very much depends on, okay, what role you're looking at, what process you're going through. You might be asking some of those questions. How do we know that? How do we find out? So the GC Index, what it will do is when people complete them, either as an individual or as a team, it can look at different elements, and it's broken down into like kind of 4 different reports, as it were. So you've got your leadership combinations, which focuses on those kind of leadership proclivities. So it's how do they bring teams together, and it looks at the top 2. So out of the different proclivities you can have, it looks at those top 2 combinations, and what does that say about you as a leader? It also looks at an inclusive report, so looking at the highest proclivity as each person in the team. So you can see, actually, in this team, there's a really strong proclivity for this certain style, more so than others. It can look at the potential impact, which focuses on the energy that could be harnessed to unlock potential. So a bit like my client earlier, he's got a lot of energy in a certain area that isn't being harnessed and utilized at the minute. So how can we get that out? And then the dominant impact, which focuses on the type of energy within the team that can work for the team, and potentially how it can work against it as well. So again, really powerful. And then in this view, looking at an aggregate of individual scores where it's kind of 7 and above. So 7, I'll explain about how the scores work, but anything that's 7 or above is high. So it looks at any of those impacts that are higher. So in terms of how you can use the GC index in terms of, the impact it can have, we call it powered by the GC index because it's an element of a bigger picture. Usually you can look at it individually. So like the client I mentioned earlier, in their career, it's empowering them in terms of the role that they're doing, and it also meets their well-being, because if they're in a role where that is meeting their energies, they're gonna enjoy it and they're going to be happy. And then we look at the team. So look at the team dynamics, look at where we can have maximum impact and impactful collaboration. And actually you can even aggregate it up further and look at it as a whole organization. And I'll show you some slides about how that might look. But you can look at it at an organizational level and break it down by departments and see, well, actually in this department, we might need a bit more continuous improvement. In this department, we might need more innovative thinking, and really see what that pattern looks like. So it's really good for things like organizational design, stuff like that. So essentially, when we're looking at the GC index, we're looking at the things that are a bit more hidden. So personality, we can see it playing out in people's behaviors and how they react to things. Learned behavior, expertise, and skills and experience is less visible, but we measure it through CVs and through talent development pipelines and things like that. But natural inclinations is the way we naturally think and act, is actually quite hidden, and it sometimes is even hidden to ourselves. We don't necessarily acknowledge these things. So this is the GC index then, and these are the different proclivities. Let me move your faces again a little bit. So firstly, you have your game changers. So they're looking at possibilities. What could be possible? There's no limit to the imagination. It's blue sky thinking. It's creative, it's inventive, and it's driving transformational change. Oh, sorry, I need to move your faces again because I miss it. And then you have oh no, it's clicking too fast now. But then you have in the left-hand column, you have your strategists. So they're making sense of these ideas. What are the patterns? What are the trends? What's the plan? How are we going to implement? How are we going to deliver this? Then you have your implementers down here in red. They're making it happen. So, and they're all about productivity. So how are we going to deliver this? What's the practical and operational ways that we can focus on delivery? They love projects and programs. Then you've got your polishers. So this isn't a completer finisher if you're familiar with the Belbin languages. This isn't necessarily about that. This is about continuous improvement. This is about how do we make this excellent? It's all about making things brilliant with polishers. And then in the middle, you have your playmakers. And they're around getting the best out of everyone. They're responsible for groups and teams reaching consensus. It's all about collaboration. It's about shared views, and it's about inclusion. So a lot of stakeholder management with a playmaker. And this is just a lovely little diagram about how this kind of meets the business cycle, as it were. It doesn't matter what you're doing, if you're providing a service or a product. This is the cycle. You're creating an idea, you are making sense of that idea, you're making it happen, you're making it brilliant, and then we're all working together. So they are kind of interconnected. So what the GC index does is it has a language. So this is what I'm talking about with the GC Translate. What you can actually do, is actually an AI tool where if you were to look at your own company purpose statement, perhaps, or even a job description, you could copy and paste it into the GC index. And what it does is it comes out and says, oh, the words that you're using in these statements are really resonating with polishers because you're using certain words about innovation, continuous improvement, or actually you're appealing to game changers, because there's lots of words there about creativity and innovation. And what it does is it gives you a snapshot of actually, is our job descriptions really resonating with the people we want to attract for these roles? Is our purpose, our company purpose, representative of our employees in that organization? So that's another really, really pragmatic, easy to use tool that really kind of brings it to life. And I have done, again, working with organizations where, especially in the recruitment space, there was an engineering company I'm working with, and they were very much around implementing project. They do lots of projects, lots of processes, and lots of making things great. So a lot of polisher. So when I copied and pasted their purpose, it was all about implementing and polishing. It was all about our software and our systems, and our robotics is state of the art and it's brilliant. Not very many game changers though. So I was like, yeah, you're brilliant now, but in 5 years' time, when the competitors are coming in with a new innovative idea, you might be left behind. Perhaps we need a bit more game changing in there. Perhaps we need to be attracting more of those kind of people. And then this is how it looks. So you have your individual team profile, you have your team, which is an aggregated, and then you can have an organization. So when you look at your own individual profiles, it basically shows you where your proclivities are. So this is a bit about the report. So it's a 27-page report. So it's really thorough, really robust, and it's all underpinned by psychology. There's we call him Dr. GC. He's a psychologist, and every now and then as a group of people, we might go to him and say, this profile is really interesting. What questions should I be asking here? And they might kind of analyze it a little bit, which is really great. But what it does is it looks at the different proclivities and how they're scored based on your answers. So anything, I think, do I have a breakdown? I don't know if I put the breakdown in actually. But anything that's kind of a 1 to 3 score, you don't have the energy for. In fact, you might actively try and avoid it. So it's nothing. This isn't saying whether you're good or bad or indifferent at certain activities, but what it is saying is you might actually try and avoid it. And if you avoid it, it might not be something that's necessarily in your strong skill set, because you're just going to be like, oh, I hate doing that. I'm just going to avoid it. If it's anything that's 7, 8, 9, or even 10, I've seen a few 10s, then you have a strong proclivity for. So these are things you're going to be naturally attracted to when you're in the flow of work. That's the kind of work you'll be doing. So that's your kind of natural inclinations. And anything in the middle, kind of 3 to 4, it's not taking energy away from you, and it's not necessarily giving you energy either. So might not be actively avoiding it, but it's an area where actually it's not where you're going to do the best flow of work. You may be able to turn it up or turn it down depending on what activities you're doing, but you're not going to actively avoid it, but it might not be your favorite thing. Then you have the team view, which I'm going to look at in a moment for us. Pretend we're a team, and then it's kind of an aggregated score to say, well, this is what the team profiles look like. And then you can even add at the top the team leader. Well, what's this telling us? Are they recruiting in their own image, or is it because the type of role they're doing, that's what the kind of people it's going to be attracting? These are the people we need. Do we need something different? Or is there a big mix? Is there a real diversity? What do we need? And then, as I mentioned, you can even have an organizational view. So you can look at it by department and see, okay, well, which is the strongest proclivity in these teams, and how does that look? So it's, again, really useful when looking at organizational design and things like that. So in terms of how you might use this then as a HR practitioner, for example, you would look at understanding what the business needs are. So this is what I'm saying about what I love about it is it really resonates with the business language. So if I was working with a business, I'd be thinking, well, why do you want to do this? Is it because you're going through a transformational program? Is it a change program? Is it because you want to align your business processes, for example? So, I mean, these probably look a little bit small, but for example, that middle one, where you can see the bar charts. This is a company that was a software company, and they were very process driven, and it's broken down by quarters. So they were rolling out a project. At the beginning of the project, they needed a game changer. They needed the ideas. They needed the innovation. And then they needed a strategist because they needed somebody to make sense of it and put a plan in place. Then in the next quarter, actually, they needed less game changing, because otherwise what's going to happen is we're going to keep getting more and more and more and more ideas, which is fantastic. But at some point we need to move on, and we can't just keep getting more ideas all the time. And actually we need a bit more implementing now, and a playmaker, because we need to do that stakeholder management piece. Then you need more implementing and a bit more polishing. Okay, well, now we've got this, how are we going to make it better? How are we going to do the continuous improvement? So you can actually map it. So you can map your resources to what you're trying to do. And that's just an example with a project, but there's all sorts of different things, transformational change programs, all sorts of things you could think about how you're going to map your people. And if projects are getting stuck, for example, well, why is that? Is it because we've got a bunch of game changers all trying to work together? They're all coming up with these amazing ideas, but actually we're not progressing with any of them because the ideas just keep coming. And so we need all of those things, but it's at what point we need them the most, I think, is the essence of it. And then you can look at, okay, well, understand how it's currently aligned. How are you currently doing it? What does it actually currently look like in terms of how your team makeup is, how your purpose meets with the demographic that you've got? Is it resonating? Does that work? And then the step 3 will then be about aligning it. Well, how do we rejig it? So actually the game changes, we might need to move over here a little bit and bring in more implementers. And do we need more diversity in this team? Or actually, no, we don't. We need more polishers in this team. We don't need the diversity because that's what they're doing. So all those questions, but you can really align it to what the business is trying to achieve. So this is the kind of design thinking around the GC index in terms of, well, okay, so you've got a load of strategists. How are we going to work with them? It's about understanding the challenge. It's about making sense of it. It's about recognizing the bigger picture, perhaps. And I won't go into all of these things, but you can kind of see, you can actually kind of map out, well, okay, these are the different proclivities we've got. How are we going to map that to our organizational design, for example? It gives you a bit of a head start, essentially. So looking at individual profiles that we've got here, this is you guys. So these are the 15 people that I had the data for at the time of producing this. So you may be here, you may not be here. But as you can see, quite a diverse group of people. One thing that I found really interesting, and I've done this with HR people before, is I would expect HR to be really strong in the playmaking, because it's about working through people and being really people focused. Now with my own profile, I am not a playmaker. And there's quite a few here. I can see there's some 10, so really strong playmakers, but there's also some, like there's a couple of 2s there. So that actually takes away energy. And I was thinking, well, that's really interesting. What does that say about me? I'm in an HR role and I'm not a playmaker. And actually, when I thought it through, it's like, well, it makes sense because I'm a consultant, I'm a business partner. And in those roles, I tend to be working on my own. You know, I am all about the effectiveness of other people, but that's not necessarily an impact in terms of what I'm doing as an individual. I don't really actually like relying on other people to get things done. I don't want to have to wait for some other person to do their bit so I can go on and do my bit. I just kind of want to crack on and get on with it. So when I thought it through, I thought, yeah, that makes sense. So it's quite interesting how you might have an assumption even about your own self, that actually this opens up and it's like, oh, interesting. One of the other things that came out with me was I'm quite a strong strategist. I'm a strategist implementer. And I remember years and years ago, I was told I needed to be more strategic. And it's always been a bit of a trigger word for me, is like, what does strategy mean anyway? And it turned out I'm very strategic. Who knew? And I was like, well, that's really interesting. Well, what does strategy mean? It means having a plan, understanding it, trying to make sense. sense of it. Or Maxine says, I'd love to know which one I am. Yeah, a couple of people saying they would love to know. And yeah, what at the end of this, I have got my my LinkedIn profile and contact, and I've also got all your email addresses. So I'll reach out to you all and say, look, if you want me to send you your profile, if you want me to just send it, or if you want me to go through it with you, I'm more than happy to, because it's really interesting. Elaine has asked, does the tool heavily rely on AI? So I think that's around the GC Translate. Is actually not automated in that sense. How we're actually using the GC index is, obviously the more you use it, the cleverer it gets, but it's very much controlled by the team at the GC index. So if, for example, I working with an organization and it's not coming up with certain words, I might go back to them and say, these words seem to be missing. Why is that? Because there's a lot of science around, for example, the word team. So I had one recently where they thought, well, team is clearly a playmaker. Why is that not highlighting a playmaker word? Well, actually, the context of how you're using team is really important. And it's not as simple as that. So actually, there's a lot of work and science in the back end with actual humans rather than AI that are developing it, which is quite interesting. Let's see if there's any more questions. So Elaine, so given that project and team needs change, does that mean that people are taken on and off the project or work stream? And if so, how does this help with work satisfaction for the individual and have longer term buy-in to the work or project? Now, that's a really good point. And I think if you are a project-based business, one of the things I'm working with one client is implementing a more agile way of working. And what that would essentially do is actually thinking about, well, at the beginning of a process, we need more game changers. And then we kind of redeploy them elsewhere later on where we need that energy again. So it's more so from a work satisfaction, it ticks the boxes. If you need a longer term buy-in in a work on project, that might be somebody more like a polisher who is all about continuous improvement, making it better. Now you're likely to have them in a longer term. And if it's like a 3-year project, they might see through the full 3-year project because actually that's the space they want to be in. It might not even be as formulaic as that. It could be just, if you're looking at an organizational structure, actually in this team, we need more game changers, we need a bit of innovation, but actually in this team, we need more strategic thinking. And that's kind of where it sets. If that makes sense. Hopefully I've answered that question. So how long would a profile be valid for, and do our proclivities change much over time? So similar to personality, it's relatively set to a certain degree, but it does change with life experience like anything else does. One of the lovely things I like about the GC index from a personal perspective is I have the opportunity to do my own profile every year, and they also give us friends and family links as well. So my husband and my kids have all done it, and we can do that every year to see how it's changed. So yes, you can do it every year. It's not going to change that dramatically. It's more of a slow and steady change, because where our energies tends to be a very natural thing. You might through habit or through experience actually think, actually I quite like a bit more strategic thinking, but you're unlikely to go from a 1 to a 10 at any point. I think you're very unlikely to go from this really saps my energy to, my God, this really energizes me. The ones in the middle might tweak a little bit, but it is worth retaking them every now and then for sure. And Nigel just needs to drop off, but I will link in with him later. So yeah, so this I just think this is really interesting, and I know HR is such a broad industry. So some of you might be in recruitment, some of you might be business partners, consultants, which is why you'd expect the profiles to all be different, because it all brings different energies. But you can see the diversity there, even in this group. How I'm really interested in whoever's number 15. I have to find out, because they're a very strong game changer, and that's something I haven't seen that much in HR people. I tend to see lots of strong strategists, implementers, playmakers, but less so the game changers. So that person would be very interesting to talk to about how how are they able to bring that into their role, and are their needs being met, and is there a way that we can kind of, that's something that can rub off on some of us other HR people. But what the GC index does as well is it looks at the top 2 strong proclivities, and that's your kind of your GC profile. And what they actually do as well, which I really like, is some of them have it on as their signature, chief polisher, or so I'm a strategist implementer. And so that's the kind of the language we use. So I like to have a plan, and I like to get on and do it, essentially, in simplistic terms. Maxine would like a further conversation, absolutely. Now, what have I got next? To remind myself. So this is how we look as a group in terms of our leadership combinations. So again, if you see here, the biggest in terms of the combinations are strategist implementers again. So a bit like me, we like to have a plan, we like to understand the plan, and we like to just get on and do it. And I think in a business partner, that's probably quite a familiar thing, because you get the business strategy and it's our role to try and make sense of it and then apply it in our context. So that kind of makes sense. We've also got some playmakers and some polishers there as well. So playmakers all around collaboration. It could be that you are managing a HR function, for example. That playmaker bit might come through a little bit more. So Sophie's asked, how is it decided between the 2 of the same scores, which one outranks the other? That's a very technical question and a very good question. There is a science behind that as well. It's all around the psychology of it. And what we quite often do as a group of people, we call ourselves GCologists. Don't know if I like it or not, but we're going with it. Is we sometimes have profiles like that where there might be 3 9s or something. I have not seen 3 9s actually. There might be 3 7s, and it's like, well, actually the GC index will pull out the combination that fits, because there's a science behind the fact that actually if you've got a polisher versus a strategist, in the context of it, a polisher would have, actually no, it's the other way around, the strategist would be dominant, as it were. So there's dominant ones. But when we do get individual scores like that, I would go to Dr. GC and say, right, explain the science behind this, because I'm not a psychologist, but there is a science behind it. And it does happen. It does happen quite regularly. A lot of it's around the combinations of them as well. There's my screen not moving. Go. So then when you're looking at this as a team, you might be thinking, well, how am I going to implement this? How am I, what am I going to do with it? And you might want to explore certain things like reflecting on how it looks against the profile of the team leader. And also in terms of, are they recruiting in their own image, or is there certain proclivities that they've got that's actually hindering other people? So there might be a huge game changer and coming up with all these great ideas, but you've got your strategists or your implementers that they're going, I just want to get on with it now. And actually it's inhibiting them. And it's understanding that team dynamic to understand how their leadership style might be coming through. And I wonder if don't know if I've put in here actually. This is quite nice. They're talking about the dominant roles. This is all completely made up, so don't hold me to this. But it's just a really nice way to demonstrate the different combinations and how it might see through. So, for example, we're assuming Richard Branson, very well-known leader, he could be, if you took the GC index, a game changer and a playmaker, because he's all about having these really innovative, out-of-the-box ideas, and then he's all about working through other people. You can see it in his culture at Virgin, how he tries to bring people along this journey with him. So you could say he's a game changer playmaker. Martin Luther King is an implementer. He's about action, very action driven, and then making it better, making life better. So you can see how it kind of plays out in the different kind of styles you might see. So yeah, you start with the highest scores, and then that looks at what your potential strengths could be, because you're going to have a natural inclination in that area. and it shapes the way you make impact. So if you really focus on those energies that you'll make it where you've got the most energy, you're likely to make the most impact. There's a bit more there about how these things come across in terms of the different ones. So for example, there's a few strategist implementers in this group. So at my best, I will shape strategic plans and deliver them. I will get things done. I need to ensure that I involve others as much as possible in the thinking and the doing. So that's how that might play out. So and then we look at the team snapshot in terms of how the scores are aggregated. And you'd ask questions like, well, how are we working together as a team? How's this playing out? Which of these views is most evident when the team's not functioning at its best? So it's really good for team development. I'm just very conscious of time. And how well the team is aligned. And this is the aggregate score for us as a group. So you've got quite evenly spread strategists, polishers, and a few game changers. Now this is a really nice example as well as about how the theory works behind it. So you have on the right hand side obsession. So if you're a game changer or a polisher, you might get obsessed with things, obsessed with ideas, obsessed with making things better. It's never going to be perfect. On the left hand side, you might be more pragmatic. So for example, myself as an implementer strategist, I'm quite pragmatic. It's good enough. Let's just get on and do it. Then you also have at the top, you have your imagination. That's where you have these people need to have thinking space. They need to have time to mull over ideas. And at the bottom, you kind of have more action orientated people, maybe a bit very more task driven, want to get on and do it. So you can see how that kind of plays out as well, which is quite nice. But yeah, maybe we need more game changers in HR. I'm seeing trends there generally. So maybe we don't, I don't know. Questions to ask ourselves. And these are the dominant. So this is the top dominant score for most people. So we're a bunch of implementers generally. We're action driven, get on and do it type energies. We've got a few continuous improvements. Let's make it amazing. Bit of strategy. Again, game changers is the lowest, interestingly. And this is the potential impact. So these are based on the scores of 6 and above, so not the top scores. So actually, we could have a bit more strategic thinking here if we unlocked that potential a little bit more. So this is the game-changing bit comes into it. Actually, these aren't necessarily your top performing employees all the time. It could be actually there's a potential here. We can unlock that in all of our employees. And then this is like how we might run a team session. I won't go into that too much. And then the framework. Do we see a future? How do we create a culture? And then there's another example of how we might use the data that we're given. I won't go into that too much detail in the essence of time. In terms of credibility, because it's still a relatively new tool on the market, it is being recognised out there now. The HRD Gartner, which I really love, is they called it a cool vendor, because it's a bit different and it's really practical as well. So yeah, it is starting to get a lot of noise in the industry. So it's nice to be there at the beginning of their journey, really. And yeah, Maxine's asking for a copy of the slides. Absolutely, I can send them over to Joe, and I'm sure you'll be happy to circulate them. A couple of people are interested in finding out more. So there's 2 things really. There's, obviously wanting to find out about your own profiles. I've got your email addresses as well, but reach out. I've got my LinkedIn profile there, so reach out to me. This is something that either can be run within your organizations as you hire somebody like me to run a team event for you, or it might be something you want to look at yourselves. And that's kind of what happened to me, actually. I was looking for somebody to run something for me and thought, actually, I want a bit of this myself. And that happens too. So either conversation is a great conversation to have. So if anybody's interested, but if nothing else, I'll be happy to send over your profiles, and you can do a bit of analysis in terms of how that resonates with you all.
Siobhan, the couple of the people that had said that they wanted a little bit more information, how do you want to approach that? Do you want to email them, or do you want, I don't know whether they want to stop on after the call. How do you want to do it?
I will, if you could send me a message on LinkedIn, those people that want to find out a bit more, then that's probably the easiest way.
Yeah, okay. Well, what I do is I always send out an email to everyone that signed up after the event. So I'll put your LinkedIn URL on there so people can connect with you.
And you can put my email address on there as well, Joe. That's fine.
Right, okay, brilliant.
If nothing else, I love connecting with other HR people anyway, so it's all good.
All right, cool. So what I'll do is I'll send, I always put a post on LinkedIn after the event, and what I'll do is I'll send out an email to everybody and I'll attach the LinkedIn post. So if you would like a copy of the slides or the recording, then please put a comment against the LinkedIn post. Our next event that we're running is on Tuesday, the 21st of November at 12:30. And it's called How to Build Your Personal Strength as a Business Partner. So a link to sign up will be included in the email. We also send out a feedback survey to everyone that's signed up as well. So if you've got 5 minutes to complete it, then your feedback would be greatly appreciated. Yeah, all it takes me to say is that thanks very much for Siobhan and putting it together. A really interesting and novel idea, really. So thanks very much, and thanks for everyone to signing up and listening. I'm sure that you agree it was really interesting.
Great, thanks for the time. Thanks for the opportunity, Joe.